And of course, people have come from across America and from across the world to be here for this moment. And one of the people who's come here to watch Muhammad Ali on his final journey is Stephanie Meade. Stephanie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Stephanie, you've come all the way from Seattle to see this moment when Muhammad Ali makes his final journey. Why is it so important to you to be here?
Well, I really have a lifelong relationship with Muhammad Ali. When I was just 10 years old, I started writing to him. My father was disabled, and so I had a very unique childhood, and I spent a lot of time indoors, and we would watch videos of Muhammad Ali, and my father told me all about him. And so when I was 10, I decided I was going to write to him, and I just was convinced that he was my friend, and everyone told me I was crazy, that he would never write back to me, that things like that didn't happen. But I had faith in him, so I wrote that letter. And 3 weeks to the day of my letter, Muhammad Ali wrote back to me, and I was so thrilled. And so we continued writing back and forth to each other, and I would send him my report cards. I would tell him secrets that I didn't tell anyone else, and so that continued for several years. And then around 1991. I'm sorry.
That's good. Oh, Stephanie, thank you for those memories of Muhammad Ali. And we'll just take a moment now. Stay with us, but we'll just look at those pictures. You can see all the people there who are lining the streets of Louisville. You can see there the car which is carrying Muhammad Ali's casket. You can see that car there. It's about to be leaving the funeral parlor. Family members are there. This is a day when Louisville is celebrating its most famous son, the man who did so much to put Louisville on the map, the man who wasn't just a boxer, because he was so much more than a boxer, wasn't he, Stephanie?
He absolutely was. He was far greater than boxing. He is just an extraordinary humanitarian, and I was so fortunate to have had a relationship with him. And as I was saying, in around 1991, he was in Seattle, and I showed up with nothing but one of his letters in my hand, and he let me come into the building where he was being honored, and he actually asked Mike Tyson to give me his chair, and he let me sit down beside him and chat with him and have dinner with him. And he just had the most wonderful soul, and he was so good to everyone, and he wanted the world to be better and full of love, and he always strived to just come out every single day, no matter what the challenge is. And particularly in his later life, when he was challenged with Parkinson's, he really showed us how to really come out, so to speak, for that last round in life, and do what you have to do. And so he was just a huge inspiration to me. And as a child, I would hear friends talk about Superman, and I always thought that was silly, because I thought, who needs Superman? I had Muhammad Ali. And he just, he stayed in contact with me throughout the years. And in fact, in 2014, he and his gracious wife Lonnie were so kind, and they invited my whole family to their home, and which was a wonderful opportunity for my father to finally meet Muhammad. And they were just so kind to me. He just has the kindest heart of anyone, and so I just had to be here to honor him today.
And of course, he and his wife Lonnie planned this day meticulously, didn't they? They knew the eyes of the world would be on his car as it processes through Louisville, that car carrying his casket before he's taken to the Cave Hill Cemetery to be buried. I mean, you've met Lonnie. She's his fourth wife, but she seems to have been a huge influence on him.
Lonnie is incredible. She's absolutely the rock that has gotten him through the situation, and I think he leaned very heavily on her, and her heart is so kind and gracious as well, and I think that she has just been a guiding force for him, and she's just wonderful. I can't say enough good about her.
And what has it meant to you, having this connection to Muhammad Ali? Presumably when you first wrote to him, you never dreamed that he would
No.
write back?
Well, I did. Like I said, every time he would look into the camera and smile as a child, I was convinced he was smiling at me. I just knew he was my friend. So I had this childlike faith that he was going to be my friend and talk to me. But Muhammad Ali has been the single greatest impact on my life. I had read an interview that he said during that third fight with Frazier, the Thrilla in Manila, that it was the closest thing to death that he had ever experienced at that point. And he said that the reason that Frazier didn't come out for that 15th round was because he knew that he, Ali, was coming out for that 15th round. And that sort of became a mantra in my life of coming out for the 15th round. No, even if you feel like you're going to die, you have to come out.
And so many people, I think, have been inspired by that lesson. That's why we're seeing the crowds here today
Absolutely.
in Louisville. And people are celebrating him, aren't they, on so many levels, I think, as a boxer, as an emblem of black power, as a proud American Muslim.
Absolutely.
I mean, it seems like in so many ways he was really ahead of his time.
He absolutely was ahead of his time. And there'll never be, in my opinion, anyone as impactful as Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
And and I think today what we're celebrating, what we should be celebrating, is not just the performance of a lifetime, but a lifetime of performance.
A lifetime of performance, absolutely. And this is in many ways the final performance from Muhammad Ali. You can see there the car containing his casket is moving through the streets of Louisville. You can see the motorcade there behind him. Just look at the crowds, the celebrations. So much pride here in Louisville of someone who was so much more than just a boxer, someone who stopped fighting and then became this extraordinary figure. Not just his battle with Parkinson's, his courageous battle, wasn't it, Stephanie? But just the compassion and the kindness that you're talking about there. It seems so strange, doesn't it, that someone who was a boxer, which is the most brutal of sports, also had this kindness that you're talking about, Stephanie, and wrote to you and to your disabled father.
Yes, and he never failed to write to me, and that's one of the things that I think if we stop to consider, what celebrity or sports figure today would stop and write to a child each and every time?
Yes, not just once, but repeatedly.
Not just once, but repeatedly. He never failed to write to me. And I needed a friend, and at a time when I needed it as a child, he was there for me, not once, not twice, but every single time over the course of several years. And it's just really incomparable.
Well, it is, and you can see, that people are responding to everything he stood for, and that's why they're lining the streets of Louisville. In this day of the celebrity sportsman and of endorsements and of people towing the line, you don't really see that anymore. No one would dare to be as outspoken as he was about civil rights.
Absolutely not. And that's one of the really amazing things what you just said, because, he had the courage of his convictions. He said, just throw me in jail. And who among us would do that today?
Well, and he suffered for that, didn't he? Because he lost his boxing license because he stood up against the U.S. government. He refused to be drafted into the army to fight in Vietnam, and boxing punished him.
Exactly.
But he lost probably his best 3 years in boxing because of that. And yet he wasn't knocked out, was he? He came back to be the champion, and that's an inspiring lesson.
He came out for that 15th round, and more than that, I think he forgave us. All of the system that was sort of harsh to him during those early years and took away his title and took away his livelihood. He forgave us, and he came back and he treated us well. And we're all so better for having Muhammad Ali in our world.
We'll just take a little moment there, Stephanie, to look at those pictures of people on the route saying farewell to Muhammad Ali. So many people there along that route. And Stephanie, your father, what was it that drew him to Muhammad Ali? Was he just an avid boxing fan?
Yes, I think initially he was. And, my father, as I mentioned, was disabled. And I think that for a disabled person especially to be able to see the physical body in such perfect form and to be able to move with such fluidity was a very special thing to someone who was disabled. And then I think that it was almost impossible not to love Muhammad Ali. I mean, he was poetic and talented and charismatic, and so, you know, who couldn't love him?
And we can hear there the crowds along the route chanting Ali, Ali. Celebration there of this man. So much more than just a boxer, wasn't he, Stephanie?
Absolutely. He was so much greater than boxing. And if you look at one of my favorite memories of Muhammad Ali on the global stage is during the Olympics when he lit that torch. And
that moment in the 1996 Olympics in Atlanta, and that was when it became clear to the world, wasn't it, that just how debilitating his Parkinson's was.
Exactly. And I love the fact that he didn't hide his Parkinson's from us. You know, he got up there and he showed us that despite his struggle and his fight, he was still coming out for that 15th round, and he was still coming out and fighting and showing that to us, and that's just incredibly inspirational.
It is. And Stephanie, you had the privilege of actually meeting Muhammad Ali,
did.
unlike probably so many of the people who were there turning out to cheer him. Oh, look, people throwing flowers there. That's exactly what the mayor of Louisville asked people to come and bring flowers and bring their smiles, bring their tears. But you met him.
Yes.
How did he strike you as a person?
And I'm not just saying this because, you know, we're all here, but he is the kindest person I've ever met. It's hard for me still to speak of him in the past tense. He welcomed me, you know, he threw his arms around me and let me hug him for as long as I wanted to. And my visit with him, I saw him this past April, and he was just so kind to everyone. And when some of the pictures that were on your website today were from one of my visits in 2014, and I just held his hand and I told him how much I loved him, and he was so kind, and he wasn't able to speak, but his eyes were very alive, and he smiled and he hugged me, and he just, you know, one thing he said is, if everyone in the world loved each other the way they love me, it would be a better world. And it's true, and he knew that.
I mean, it's interesting how we're going to see later today, after this procession through the streets of Louisville, when he's been buried, the memorial service that he planned so carefully. It's an interfaith memorial service. It follows on from yesterday's Muslim funeral prayer ritual, but that was important to him, wasn't it? The idea that we love one another, which again seems strange coming from a boxer, from a pugilist, but he seems to have embraced that message in his later years. I mean, he was a United Nations messenger of peace, among other things.
He absolutely did. I think that some of his beliefs did soften a bit over the years, and I think that he understood that he had his beliefs, but we all had ours, and he wanted us all to embrace each other and not feel angry toward each other about them. He was very much a messenger of peace.
He was. Well, Stephanie Meade, thank you so much for joining us. Stephanie, you corresponded with Muhammad Ali for years.
Yes.
He was an important part of your life. You've come all the way from here to Seattle to be here. So thank you so much, Stephanie.
Thank you so much.
I know this is an important day to you.
It is.